5 gangsters who built empires through murder. 5 deaths ordered not by police, but by the men who once called them family. Bugsy Siegel. June 20th, 1947. Beverly Hills. The man who built Las Vegas is reading the Los Angeles Times in his girlfriend's living room, and the Mafia Commission has already voted on his execution. Siegel had risen through Murder Incorporated as one of Meyer Lansky's closest partners. In 1945, he convinced the syndicate to fund the Flamingo, the first major casino on a stretch of desert highway outside Las Vegas. The investors were the New York and Chicago families. The money was theirs. The Flamingo opened in December 1946 and lost money. Costs had ballooned from $1 million to $6 million. Siegel's girlfriend, Virginia Hill, had been making frequent trips to Switzerland, depositing money in a numbered Swiss account. The bosses noticed. In May 1947, the syndicate met at the Hotel National in Havana. Lucky Luciano chaired. The vote was unanimous. Siegel had skimmed from his own investors and the Flamingo had become a humiliation. Killing a partner of Siegel's rank was rare, and that was the point. The order doubled as a message to everyone else who held a share. On the night of June 20th, Siegel was sitting on a chintz sofa in Hill's Beverly Hills home, reading the newspaper. Hill was in Paris. A 9mm carbine fired through the window from the rose garden outside. 8 rounds. Siegel was hit in the head and chest. 20 minutes later in Las Vegas, 3 of Lansky's men walked into the Flamingo and announced they were taking over. The casino kept operating without interruption. The man who built Las Vegas did not fall because the law caught him. He fell because the system that had funded him decided his usefulness had ended. John Dillinger. July 22, 1934. Chicago. The FBI's first official public enemy #1 walks out of the Biograph Theater on a Sunday evening, and the woman beside him is wearing an orange dress, so the agents can identify him in the crowd. Dillinger had robbed 24 banks across the Midwest in 14 months. He had escaped 2 jails, once by walking out of an Indiana sheriff's office, holding a wooden gun he had carved himself and blackened with shoe polish. He had become, in 1934 America, a folk hero. The newly empowered FBI under J. Edgar Hoover. 3 previous attempts had failed. The most recent, at Little Bohemia Lodge in Wisconsin, had ended with the FBI killing the wrong men and Dillinger escaping out a back window. Hoover's career depended on this arrest. Then a Romanian brothel madam named Anna Kumpanash contacted the Chicago FBI office. She was facing deportation. She offered Dillinger in exchange for staying in the country. She would take him to a movie. She would wear an orange dress that would photograph as red, under the marquee lights. On July 22nd, they saw Manhattan melodrama at the Biograph. As they exited at 10:30, Special Agent Melvin Purvis lit a cigar, the signal. 3 agents moved in from the alley. Dillinger reached for the .380 Colt in his pocket and ran toward Lincoln Avenue. He was hit 5 times. He was dead before he reached the pavement. Kumpanash was deported anyway. Dillinger had built his myth on the idea that he was untouchable. He was not killed by the law alone. He was killed because someone inside his circle calculated that he was worth less alive than the price of a deportation hearing. Albert Anastasia. October 25, 1957. Manhattan. The boss of the Gambino family is sitting in a barber's chair in the Park Sheraton Hotel, his face covered with hot towels, and 2 men with bandanas pulled over their faces walk through the lobby and head straight for him. Anastasia had run Murder Incorporated through the late 30s and 40s. He was credited with ordering more than 400 contract killings. By 1957, he had taken over what would become the Gambino crime family by orchestrating the assassination of his predecessor. He had become unstable. He was talking about expanding into Cuban gambling without commission approval. He had ordered a hit on a man who had simply identified bank robbers to the FBI on television, a killing that drew federal heat onto the entire syndicate. Vito Genovese had calculated that Anastasia was the kind of risk no organization could carry. The barbershop was chosen deliberately. A man relaxes in that chair, towel over his face, hands under the sheet, bodyguard left at the door. It was the one place a feared boss made himself defenseless, and everyone in that world understood the message of killing him there. On the morning of October 25th, Anastasia took the second chair. His bodyguard, who normally stood watch, had stepped out to park the car. The 2 gunmen entered at 10:20. The barber stepped back. Anastasia, his face still covered, registered movement in the mirror. He lunged forward, attacking the reflection. The gunman fired 10 rounds into his back. He fell against the chair, then onto the floor. The killers walked out through the hotel lobby. Their identities were never officially established. Within a month, Genovese called a national meeting in upstate New York to formalize the new arrangement. The man who had ordered 400 deaths was killed in 7 seconds by the same organizational logic he had spent his life enforcing. Carmine Galante. July 12, 1979, Brooklyn. The acting boss of the Bonanno family is finishing lunch on the back patio of Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant, a cigar in his mouth, a glass of wine half full, and 3 men in ski masks walk in through the kitchen. Galante had spent 20 years in federal prison for narcotics trafficking. Released in 1974, he had spent the 5 years since reasserting control over the Bonanno family's heroin operation. He had begun killing rival captains. He had refused to share with the other New York families. He had announced openly that he intended to become the boss of bosses. The other 4 families convened. The decision was unanimous. The contract was issued through 3 Sicilian zips operating under Bonanno Captain Sonny Black Napolitano. The trap depended on people Galante trusted. His own underboss agreed to step out of the room, and the bodyguard sitting at his table that afternoon had already been told what was coming. On July 12th, Galante was eating lunch with his cousin and that bodyguard. At 2:45, 3 masked men entered through the rear. Shotgun and pistol fire. Galante was hit in the chest and face. His cousin was killed beside him. The bodyguard walked out unharmed. The newspaper photograph the next morning showed Galante on his back on the patio tiles, the cigar still clenched in his teeth. He had announced to every other family that he intended to take what they had built. He had not been killed by ambition. He had been killed by announcing it out loud in a system that prefers its succession quiet. Dutch Schultz. October 23, 1935, Newark. The bootlegger who controlled the Bronx beer trade is standing at the urinal of the Palace Chop House when a man with a shotgun walks into the bathroom, and the order to kill him was signed not by the police, but by the same commission that had once protected him. Schultz had built a fortune in prohibition liquor and had moved into the Harlem numbers racket in the early 30s. By 1935, he was facing federal tax evasion charges. The prosecutor pursuing him was Thomas Dewey, the Manhattan special prosecutor whose campaign against organized crime would eventually carry him to the governorship of New York. Schultz proposed to the commission Luciano, Lansky, Anastasia, that Dewey be assassinated. The commission rejected the proposal. Killing a federal prosecutor would invite the kind of national crackdown that had broken the Capone organization. Schultz left the meeting and announced he would do it anyway, on his own authority, within 48 hours. The commission voted that night. Schultz was now the threat that Dewey could only have hoped to be. On the evening of October 23rd, Schultz was at the Palace Chop House in Newark with 3 of his lieutenants. They were going through the night's accounts at a back table. Schultz stepped into the bathroom. Charles, the bug workman, walked in behind him with a shotgun and shot him through the abdomen. Schultz did not die at the scene. He was taken to Newark City Hospital and survived for 22 hours. In the final hours, in delirium from peritonitis and morphine, he spoke continuously. A police stenographer transcribed every word. The transcript runs to 2,000 words of fragmented confession, threats, financial references, and unfinished sentences. Treasure hunters spent the next 80 years trying to decode where Schultz had hidden several $1,000,000 before the Dewey indictment. No one ever found it. Schultz was killed by the only system that had ever protected him. The men who issued the order had calculated, correctly, that an organization survives by enforcing the limits of what it permits its own members to do. The 4 men he had wanted as allies became the men who signed his name into the same logic he had spent his career inside.